Robert the Bruce was also known as the King of the Scots and was instrumental in Scottish independence. Let's take a look at some of the major events throughout his life. The Bruce family was well established before Robert the Bruce was even born. They had ties with both the English and Scottish kings. The first Robert Bruce was granted a lordship in North Yorkshire due to loyal service to Henry I, the King of England. He was also granted Annandale and its castles in southwest Scotland by the King of Scots at the time, David I, in 1124. David I wanted the Bruce to help define royal authority in the separatist area that was southwestern Scotland. This began a long line of Bruces in Annandale, which would eventually lead to the King of Scots. Notable in that regard is the marriage of Robert Bruce, the fourth Lord of Annandale, and Isabel, the second daughter to David, brother of William the Lion. William the Lion was King of the Scots in 1165, and this marriage would ensure a Bruce claim to the throne. Robert the Bruce was born July 11th, 1274. To kick off the events that led to the eventual Scottish independence, there was the death of Alexander III. Alexander III died suddenly on March 18, 1286, with his only successor being his 3-year-old granddaughter, Margaret. Alexander III was the King of the Scots at the time, and this left leadership up in the air. The dominant political family, the Comyns, and other leadership formed a guardianship that would assume power in Margaret's stead. The Bruces took issue, as even though they were the second most prominent family, they did not have representation in the guardianship. They attacked Comyn-owned castles and disrupted Scottish government enough to force King Edward of England to broker peace between the factions. When Margaret died in September 1290, both the Comyns and Bruces offered candidates for the throne. In the end, the Comyns candidate John Balliol won out and was crowned November 20th, 1292. After this, Edward I began war with France and commanded the Scots as Lord Superior of the King of Scotland to fight for him. The king, flaunting his control over Scotland like this, pushed the government towards war, signing a treaty with France and installing a council to replace John Balliol. While the Comyns prepared for war with England, the Bruces, with historic English ties and disdain for the current Scottish government, sided with England. The Scottish were obliterated by the English force. On July 8, 1296, in Dunbar, John Balliol was stripped of his coat of arms and was nicknamed Toon Tabard. Although Robert Bruce the Elder desired the Scottish throne, King Edward intended on ruling directly, as he took significant government officials and records, as well as the Stone of Destiny, a historic Scottish artifact back into England. He appointed Scottish officials, as opposed to Bruce's, in key Scottish governmental roles. Unrest grew in Scotland as the English king moved south to deal with his war in France. Revolts began in Scotland opposing the English occupation. William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, the future King of the Scots, both rose to prominence in this period. William Wallace, along with Andrew Moray, headed the popular revolts. In contrast, Robert Bruce was supported by members of the former government such as James Stewart and Bishop Moray. Edward I did not focus on the Scottish rebellion, as he was focusing on his war with France. He promised the release of his Comyn prisoners if they helped him suppress the rebellion, thinking that their time in prison had mellowed them. Instead, they secretly helped the rebellion and eventually switched sides, aiding Andrew de Moray and William Wallace. Setting out from York, the English army met William Wallace's army in late July, just outside of Falkirk. The battle was a close call, even with the English superior numbers. However, eventually, the English infantry won out, and the Scots, along with Wallace, fled. Due to this shameful defeat, Wallace was stripped of his status as leader of the Patriot cause and as the Guardian of Scotland. There was a gap in Comyn domination over Scottish politics during their imprisonment from 1296 to 1297, and they could no longer lead unchallenged. Their Guardian of Scotland, chosen in 1298, John Comyn, had to share his status with Robert Bruce, who had recently gained national political power. This unlikely alliance was all in the name of national unity, in the hopes they would help the revolution succeed. This did not last, as in May 1300, Bruce was replaced with a Comyn ally. Both Wallace and Bruce are known as important historical figures. However, William Wallace, the figurehead of early Scottish rebellion, primarily campaigned for John Balliol. He wanted the complete removal of the English from Scottish territories. Robert Bruce, on the other hand, started on the side of English in 1296. He eventually switched sides in 1307, fighting for Scottish independence. After Falkirk, Bruce was willing to set aside his family feud with the Comyns to fight on behalf of John Balliol, who was still captive in England. However, when Balliol returned from England in 1300, Bruce switched back to the original loyalties of the English crown, renewing his allegiance to them in 1302. Wallace and Bruce, while both patriots and Scottish legends, were never on the same page. Indeed, in 1304, when John Comyn negotiated for Scottish surrender, Bruce was under service to the English crown and sought reward in Scotland for his services. In Scottish submission, John Comyn and the Comyn family in general still held dominant political power in Scotland. This was due to Edward I realizing that earlier supplanting of Scottish officers with English ones destabilized the government and led to the previous revolt. Despite Bruce's significant contribution to the English cause, he was placed in a lower station than the Comyn family in 1305. This is most likely due to the fact that Edward I valued stability and peace in Scotland, and found the Comyn family most likely to maintain this. This was also likely due to Bruce's actions throughout 1304. Bruce had been searching for his support to his claim to the throne of Scotland throughout 1304. After Balliol's loudest supporter, William Wallace, was captured and executed in 1305, the main thing standing in Bruce's way was the dominance of the Comyn family. In 1306, Bruce met with John the Red Comyn, the most powerful political figure in the country. Accounts vary on what exactly John and Robert met about on February 12, 1306. Most likely it was related to Bruce's claim to the kingship and political influence with the English. The one thing that people can agree on is that Robert the Bruce killed John Comyn in the Greyfriars Church at Dumfries. With Robert the Bruce crowning himself King of Scots 6 weeks later, his intentions were clear. As the Comyns were the dominant political force in Scotland, he either needed to gain their support or destroy their power in his quest for the king. He chose the latter. Bruce set off a civil war in Scotland, as well as angering England in the process. He quickly went into hiding, where accounts become harder to find. The English hunted him for years, going after his allies and families when they could not find him. In 1307, Robert Bruce returned to the mainland, beginning in Carrick. Due to the much larger English army, Bruce employed hit-and-run tactics and guerrilla warfare to stabilize the English and boosting morale. He slowly gained support through fear and political ambition. Edward I succumbed to disease in 1307, which was a major blow to the Comyns and English forces in Scotland. He laid plans for his successor Edward II to continue his campaign in Scotland, but ultimately Edward II withdrew himself. Due to Edward II's weak rule, Bruce was now uninhibited by English might in Scotland. He continued to strike fear to the Scots, burning castles and winning truces. Bruce's campaign continued to the main Comyn base in the north, battling between Inverurie and Ulmantrum. With his victory, Bruce had total control of northern Scotland. His unlikely victories were a combination of surprise tactics and uncoordinated enemies, which he took full advantage of. Even still, the Comyns were a major opponent against Bruce and held significant power. On June 12, 1314, the English and Scottish armies crashed, led by Edward II. Bruce was outnumbered but managed to win through tactics, sending the English army fleeing, and thereafter they made little attempt to hold on to their remaining Scottish territories. Thereafter, Robert Bruce's kingship was widely recognized and transformed his campaign into legend. However, the English still did not acknowledge him, and this war was not over. In 1318, Bruce had won back all previously Scottish territories. He then proceeded to start ransacking England. Throughout 1318 and 19, Bruce led a campaign attacking several English territories, reaching as far as Brough and Stainmore. This led to King Edward II proposing a truce lasting from 1319 to 1322. This allowed Bruce to focus on his other oppositions. The Declaration of Arbroath was a powerful appeal to the Pope to assert Scotland's independence tied to Robert the Bruce's kingship. Bruce was still on shaky grounds on the church after beginning his campaign with the murder of John Comyn in a church, but this document solidified his connection and importance to Scottish nationalism. As Bruce's campaign continued after 1322, it became clear that Scottish independence was inevitable. The Treaty of Edinburgh recognized Scotland as independent and sovereign, surrendering all English claims to overlordship. This treaty was solidified with marriage. Bruce's younger son David was married to Edward III's younger sister Joan. Bruce also wanted formal recognition from the Pope, and his request was granted, but only after his death in Cardross, after a 24-year reign.
Thank you for watching our History in the Headlines episode. If you enjoyed this series, be sure to like this video and comment on what history you want us to dive into next. If you're interested in how we make our timelines, you should check out Cleovis. Follow us on all of our socials linked in the description.